Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Double Take. Today, it might have to be called Single Take. Because yes, it's just me. I'm Alex Safey. Not here with my brother John. Because he left, it happened. He moved out to Phoenix. He's getting started working as a middle school math teacher. So yeah, we finally split up, just like the Beatles, Captain America, and Iron Man, even D. Wade and LeBron. I'm officially flying solo. Nah, I'm just kidding. John will probably be back next episode, which might be tomorrow actually, for a special, and we'll have a special guest too, for our NBA draft preview episode. But today, I do have some good stuff coming down the pipeline. We got a lot to get into. Since our last episode, an NBA champion was crowned, the Golden State Warriors, in 6 games, just as I correctly predicted. Maybe that's why John's not here, because he picked Celtics in 6. Yeah, Steph Curry was Finals MVP finally. So today I'm gonna recap the finals a little bit. Gonna jump into Steph's legacy. Where does he rank all time? There's been a lot of conversations about that. Where does this Warriors dynasty rank? That's another fun one. And, of course, got to give some early predictions for next season. So, finals recap, all right? Just quick, maybe jump through each game. Kind of quick story of each one. Game 1, that was the Celtics in the fourth quarter when the Warriors pretty much leading through 3. Celtics won that ridiculous 40-16 run. You had Derek White, Al Horford, Marcus Smart just shooting, out of their minds. Peyton Pritchard's getting some good minutes in there. I think he hit a few. So that was that game. Game 2 was the Warriors have a blowout as well. I think they were third quarter where they pop off. Game 3 was that, first game in Boston, the terrible Draymond game. All the fans are screaming, F you Draymond, and post-game, you had Klay Thompson saying that's real classy Boston. Now, Game 4 was the big one. That was the turning point, in my opinion. Just like, actually, it was a similar turning point in the 2015 finals when the Warriors also won in 6 games. That was Curry's best game ever. He had the 43 points, 10 rebounds, and, that was definitely his biggest moment in the most pressure moment that I think he had, where he came up big time. Then you had Game 5, which was the Wiggins game. Shout out Merm, my friend Merm, if you're listening. He's been on the Wiggins, bandwagon, Wiggins train all season long. Even when Wiggins was an all-star starter, which was kind of a joke and a meme. And now, you had Wiggins was the best player in that game. Curry followed up his best game of his career in the biggest spot with that Game 5, pivotal Game 5, and Curry really, for the first time ever, had 0 3-pointers in the playoffs. And so then you go to Game 6, and that was pretty much a wire-to-wire victory for the Warriors. I even just went back and watched the highlights, and it was very clear from the start, I think, that the Warriors were going to win. The Celtics really just didn't have it. So pretty much on the Warriors side of things, how did this happen, right? What I predicted was you have the veterans. They've been there before. This was their 6th finals in 8 years. And I was essentially definitely expecting Steph Curry to show up, him being kind of the old veteran MVP player. And I think at one point in our preview pod, I said, Steph Curry's 34. I'm expecting him to play well. And John was saying, well, maybe that means he's not going to play as well, an age thing. And it is interesting. I mean, this was certainly his best finals ever. He averaged, I think it was 32 points. If you actually take out that bad Game 5, even though they won, he was averaging like 34 points and almost 6 threes a game, and over 6 threes a game in this series, shooting 50% from the field and from 3 if you take out when he went 0 for 9 in Game 5, which I guess it's a little, that's unfair. But in any case, that was Steph Curry's easily his best final series. And so you had that. You had Klay, who had a pretty solid series. I mean, I think games really 3 through 5, he came in and he did what he needed to do. And then Draymond had a really pretty poor first 3 games. Game 4 he was all right. And then the last 2 games, he came through, and I loved all the talk about, he's doing this podcast. He shouldn't be doing this podcast after the game. He's distracted. That's why he sucks. And then him getting into it with the fans, and even there was one point where Dave Portnoy, I think he had 2 fouls I think it was game 4, and Portnoy's, giving the 2 fingers, and that was really funny when they Celtics ended up losing that game anyway, but it was hilarious. So really, the veterans were a big part of the Warriors win, but of course, you have to give credit to the young players. You had your Jordan Poole doing his thing, your Gary Payton Jr. coming in, having an impact, but no young player, or I guess not that young, had as big of an impact as Andrew Wiggins. Andrew Wiggins, I mean, he's a player, one of the players that I remember like watching closely in college because I knew he was going to be in the NBA. This is right as I'm really, really starting to get obsessed with NBA basketball. And I remember watching his highlights even like when I was in 8th grade in class or something. And, we thought that draft, it was like Wiggins, Jabari, who's going to be the next guy. They said Jabari, and he's on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Is he going to be better than, or he's the best high school player since LeBron? And then both of those guys really just flame out, and it seems like they're done. And I think the lesson with this Wiggins thing is we can't give up on young, raw talent, especially when they're guys who are in dysfunctional organizations. And so, Wiggins spends his whole career with a bunch of different coaches in Minnesota, kind of not the greatest rosters, not a ton of veteran presences that, he could kind of learn from. And then the Warriors, really, you got to tip your hat to their front office, to Bob Myers, who Kevin Durant wants to leave, and he's a free agent. Instead of him just walking out the door for nothing, they flip him for D'Angelo Russell, who even at the time was like, really, that seems like a weird trade. They ended up not working out. But then they have that contract, so able to flip it for Wiggins. And then when they traded for Wiggins, some people were skeptical. Other people said, hey, listen, if it's going to work with Wiggins, it's now. He's going to be surrounded by championship culture, great coach, by great teammates in Curry and guys who will take him under their wing like Draymond. And if he's ever gonna flourish, it'll be like this. And so we saw it, especially in games 5 and 6. We really saw that in action. And I want to just go through his game log really quick because Wiggins, let's say the last 3 games, or actually last 4 games, he goes 40 minutes in game 3, 43 in game 4, 42 in game 5, and 43 in game 6. So now, he's getting runs, he's on both ends, and rebounding the ball, just like a maniac. He had 16 rebounds in game 4, which was his career high, and then he had 13 rebounds in game 6, or that was 16 in game 4, 13 in game 5. Each of those would have been his career high. His career high previous to that was 11, and it was like in a regular season game. And now even just looking back at his playoff game log, I had forgotten Wiggins before this season played 5 playoff games. This was the season with Minnesota where they had Jimmy, and Jimmy somehow gets that young team to the playoffs. Yeah, giving all the credit to Jimmy. And so Wiggins played 5 games. They lose in 5 to the Houston Rockets. And then this year he comes in, and in the biggest moment of his career, he just balls out. And he was the second best player on the Warriors team. And I feel like a lot of times we'll talk when teams are trying to improve, when teams are, drafting players, when teams are signing players in the free agency. It's, can this guy be the best player on a championship team? Can he be the second best player? Can he be the third? What kind of where does the talent fall kind of in the pecking order on contenders, right? And to think that Wiggins was just the second best player on a championship team, like it's pretty surreal, especially how his career went. So of course you had the veterans on the Warriors, then you had the young players, and then most of all, it was Steph Curry, right? This was his big signature moment, his career moment, because, and I think we'd probably talked about this on the show. I know John would be still, he was chirping Curry until this year. And he was always very hard on Curry, specifically the same reason we're hard on Durant, because he hadn't really had any career, really big playoff moments, right? In the 2015 series, which John would just completely discount because Kyrie, and Love were hurt. He had a big game 4 and he had a big game 5. I believe his game 5, which was bigger than the game 4 because game 4 they tie the series. Now game 5, you go back home and Curry, I believe, has 37 points in that game. Then you go game 6 in Cleveland and finish him off where, he didn't win the Finals MVP. I think it should have been LeBron. If it wasn't going to be LeBron, I definitely think it should have been Curry. Do not think it should have been Iguodala. But of course, we know how narratives can sometimes grab a hold of the media. In any case, so I think of that series, right? That's his first Finals. He gets that championship. Then the next year, whether he was injured, whether he was not, whether it was because Draymond missed Game 5 of 2016, they end up choking that. They choke that 3-1 lead. And so then the rest is history. Kevin Durant comes, and was he good? Was he bad? Yeah, he was pretty good. But guess what? In my opinion, it's not as hard to be good when you're surrounded by greatness, not to mention, another MVP caliber player, right? And so he ends up with 3 rings and a pretty decent resume, right? And there's a lot of regular season threes and regular season accolades, and I think he had a scoring title or two MVPs, first unanimous, right? 73 wins. But it's like, when is he going to do it on the biggest stage possible? And he did do it, against the quote-unquote defensive player of the year and one of the greatest defenses, apparently a historic defense. He came in, he went into a hostile environment, really, drunk and hostile Boston crowd. That was really excited. They wanted banner 18. And what does he do? He comes in, and in the first quarter, I'm just watching him, and we see this every game that Steph Curry plays. And Steph Curry, every single basket that he gets, especially the threes, he really has to work his butt off for. I mean, he's running through screens. They're chasing him down. They're sending guys over screens and everything. And he's hitting them early in the first quarter. He's hitting them, and then he's getting hyped. He's yelling at the Boston crowd, and I was like, "Ooh, like Steph, you better show up, man. You better show up in the fourth when it counts." Because I believe in Game 3, actually, I think in like all the fourth quarters of those first 3 games, there was some stat I saw where it was like, Curry in the first 3 quarters versus the fourth quarter or something. But in any case, Curry, you could get hype in the first quarter, but all right, let's see what you got when he gets to the fourth. And now we get into the fourth quarter. Remember, it's a close game. Curry's going off. He hit a few threes. He hit that one ridiculous one where I believe it was Tatum fouled him and he kind of fell over, and they didn't call it, and it still went down. He goes up and he's getting pissed off. And when he hit that, I'm like, all right, like this guy, like I don't think he's gonna let them lose. And John was saying, listen, Alex, a close game favors the Warriors. And although I was still skeptical and I was like, I don't know, man. That was really the truth, because Boston, as we know, just can't close. They cannot close in close games. And even whatever, this is a Miami Heat podcast, as I like to say, in Game 7, they were basically asking Miami to take the game from them. And, Jimmy missed that 3. If he makes it, it's game. If he goes to the basket, maybe they also choke that. But in any case, I guess I have to mention that. The Celtics are good at blowing games in the end of the game. So that was Game 4, and that was Curry, right? That was him at his best, and then even he doesn't have that good. He doesn't make a 3 in Game 5. Game 6 comes in and closes it out, which was huge, right? So before I want to get into Steph's legacy, I want to talk about the Celtics and just what happened with them, right? And I think ultimately we saw a lot of their weaknesses that had been on display maybe in the first half of the season and throughout any of their playoff losses really too. But I think ultimately they were too young, and it's a good thing when you're ahead of schedule. And I did compare them to the 2012 OKC Thunder, who had I think all their 3 stars were under like 24 years old or whatever it was, 25 definitely. And everyone's like, oh, they're going to be back, they're going to be good, and they never made it back, and they ended up breaking it up. So in a lot of ways, I could see this team paralleling that team, because as great as they were this year, as amazing, especially on the defensive end, I think that they really had a good shot to win it, and your window isn't always open as long as you think it is. So, they were too young, and I think what happened, especially down the stretch, is where did Tatum go? Was he hurt? Was it a shoulder thing? So I know maybe if you're a Celtics fan trying to take away silver linings, maybe that's it. This was just our first finals, and if Tatum was hurt, I don't think Tatum was hurt. But they certainly, it looked like they were missing kind of that veteran, calming, confident presence which honestly we had seen Tatum do. We saw him do it in Game 6 in Milwaukee, which was huge. And I don't know. Is there a big difference between the second round in Milwaukee, when you're the favorite team versus, when you get into the finals and you're playing Golden State, who's been there before? And maybe not. I don't know. Because I always like to say Tatum doesn't have that clutch gene, but he showed it in Game 6 versus Milwaukee, and then all of a sudden, what happened in this series? He just really didn't show up at all. Let me grab his stats really quick, because he shot from 3-point land. I don't know if this has ever happened. From 3-point land in the finals, he shot 45%, which is pretty ridiculous. It's amazing. And then from just overall field goal percentage was 36%. So I'm not sure how that. I actually genuinely don't know how that makes sense. Every time he got into the paint, it looked like there was missing something, and maybe he was just gassed. They played 2 straight 7-game series. No team that's played 2 Game 7s before making it to the finals has ever won, except for the 1988 Lakers. So to do this, it was going to have to be historic. And so I don't know who was the alpha on that team. Maybe it was Tatum, maybe it wasn't, but in any case, I think that this team was just a little bit, too young, and they couldn't overcome their offensive struggles down the stretch as good as their defense was, and, the Warriors really showed, their veteran, the value of their veteran presence and kind of their just overall experience and being there before, and, that's what happened. So what's next for the Celtics? Who knows? Would I bet that they make it back next year? Absolutely not. I think, the East, it'll definitely be an uphill battle for them. I think they do have to address a few things. I think in a lot of ways, though, when you have a team this young, you should keep running it back. Whereas the Miami Heat have more veterans, I don't know if just running it back the exact same team makes the most sense. With the Celtics, they could come back healthier next season, and they might even, they might have just as good of a shot, if not even better, to win the title, right? Because if Tatum can improve, if Brown can improve, even Smart, who's been in the league for a while now, if he improves a little bit, which he did, we saw a lot of improvements from him this season. That team could be very dangerous, and it'll be interesting to see how crazy does Brad Stevens want to get. Does he want to trade some of their younger pieces, try to get a veteran guy? And the only worry there is Al Horford, right? He's a little old, and he did not look great in those last few games. I guess the last game he did play well. He was one of the few Boston players that played well, but I think there was some advanced stats of the plus minus when he was on the floor without Robert Williams, where he just wasn't as good. So I'm not anticipating him improving for next season, but they're good enough, to continue making a run next year. So let's move on to Steph's legacy. This would have been a fun one to do with John, because John has been, I don't want to say a big Steph hater, but he's definitely been very harsh on Steph over the years. And whereas I've given Steph credit, I would say most of the media, the general media, people will give him credit for is, how he's basically, he's a unicorn. There's never been a player like him. He has changed the game. The 3-point revolution, and how we want to give him credit for that, and the countless records that he continues to break year after year. He's the all-time 3-point leader, and he's only gonna that record's only gonna go farther and farther up. And so, while I gave him credit for that, John would be harsher and say, this guy, what has he done when it mattered most? And here it is. He had his, like I said, greatest game ever of his career in Game 4, big game. He had 7 threes, and he really willed them to victory that game. And he finally got that Finals MVP that, in my opinion, isn't a huge deal, but him getting this one, it really means a lot. And it really is. I believe it was Steve Kerr who said, this is a crowning achievement in his already, iconic and historic career, something along those lines of, this was his biggest moment. And so it's huge. And what does it mean for his legacy? I think that he is just, in my opinion, outside of the top 10. So if we want to actually break it down, we might get too into the weeds here with measuring players. I do think that the undisputed top 2 players of all time have to be LeBron James and Michael Jordan. Then, in any order, I think the next three are Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Russell, and Magic Johnson. I don't think that's up for discussion. People probably discount Bill Russell. They'll give Kareem, I think Kareem gets the credit that he usually deserves. Some people discount Russell, but I think if you're a true historian of the game, you respect Russell and what he did. At the end of the day, 11 rings in 13 seasons. No matter who you're playing against, you have to give that credit. Magic Johnson, and the next few guys, I believe, Larry Bird, Tim Duncan, and then Shaq, and then Kobe. So I think those 9 players, LeBron, Jordan, Kareem, Russell, Magic, Bird, Duncan, Shaq, and Kobe, have to be over Curry. Wilt, I will also put over Curry. That's 10. I have Steph Curry now as the 11th best player of all time. In my book, he just jumped over Jerry West and Hakeem Olajuwon. I already had him at 13. There could have been before maybe an argument for Oscar Robertson, Elgin Baylor, Moses Malone. But, certainly before he was top 15. And I think now he's just on the precipice of top 10. I think I could be convinced for him to be placed over Wilt. And some people, give Wilt the benefit of the doubt. I would love to sit here with someone who would make the case for Wilt. Because I think ultimately what I've noticed of just even reading in Bill Simmons' book, is Wilt was a guy, honestly, I think a good comparison might be Durant. And this might be, a hot take because I think people will view Durant very differently. But Wilt was not a guy, in my opinion, from what I've read, that he, as by himself, contributed to winning. He was always more of a stats guy until later in his career when he joins that Lakers team. Or though he had won in, I believe, 1967 with a very, very good Sixers team. And then in 1972, that amazing Lakers team where he wins the Finals MVP, I believe, that year. I believe he won Finals MVP that year. He had Jerry West on that team. Elgin Baylor had just retired. So Wilt wasn't a guy who was always contributing to winning. That's the main point. And similarly, I don't think Durant is, but Durant is obviously one of the greatest scorers we've ever seen. A lot of amazing statistics that support him, similar to Wilt. However, when I look at a guy like Steph Curry is a guy who I know him on a team, on a basketball team, it will contribute to winning, and he can contribute to winning on the highest level. He is a transcendent talent and a transcendent winner, in my opinion. And so, could you have him over Wilt? Maybe. I think the player that Bill Simmons on his pod, and he was arguing with, I believe, was it Ryan Russillo, is it Steph versus Kobe? Kobe's that next guy, and I would also give Kobe the benefit of the doubt. I think sometimes the way that we remember Kobe is a little bit, sometimes in my head at least, I let him be overshadowed by those 3 straight championships where Shaquille O'Neal was the Finals MVP. But, I obviously wasn't alive or I was alive, but I was, a baby, so I wasn't watching those. Shaq was the better player between the two, but Kobe was right there. It was in, a present day comparison would be how great Durant was on those 2 Warriors teams, and Curry was just as good. And although Curry had that value element of when you removed Curry from those teams and you had Durant and everyone else, they just were not as good. Whereas when you did have, when you had Durant missing, obviously they were still an amazing basketball team. They won a championship before Durant, they won a championship after Durant, and they won 2 with him. So, but in any case, that's where I have Curry. I think he's 11th all time now, and some people have been, of course, everyone's been getting crazy on whatever First Take and whatever Undisputed with Skip Bayless show with Shannon, and people are saying, and Stephen A was like, he's gonna win more championships than LeBron, and that might be true because the rest of LeBron's career, there's a lot of what ifs, a lot of I don't knows, there's a lot of he's 37, he'll be turning 38. He just posted the other day a video of Anthony Davis and saying, his Anthony Davis highlights, and is like, he's going to remind everyone pretty soon, which great, LeBron. I hope he does. But in any case, it'd be a hard bet to say LeBron wins, over. The over-under right now is probably 0.5 championships, and betting the over would be a tough bet. However, Curry, it's tough to win it. It's tough to get back, and they're all aging too. But they got a lot of young players, and even just Jonathan Kuminga and I think it's Moses Moody, who those guys didn't get any minutes in the finals this year, are both top. They're both lottery picks from this past season. They have James Wiseman, who knows how good he'll be. If he can get healthy, that's big. And then you have Wiggins, Jordan Poole, Gary Payton Jr., Gary Payton Jr. is not super young, but they have these young players, right? So Curry absolutely has a better chance, and Curry's younger than LeBron too. So Curry absolutely has a better chance to get to 5 rings than LeBron does. However, I want to remind everyone, if Kevin Durant doesn't go to Golden State for 2017 and 2018, for those seasons they won it, and then even 2019, I believe LeBron James absolutely has one more ring. And because we began to take it for granted over those years, LeBron at that point had made, I believe, 6 straight finals, 4 straight with the Heat, then he makes 2015, 2016 with the Cavs and loses the Warriors, then beats the Warriors when they won 73 games. And now Durant joins them. That team was not losing. That team was just not losing. And that 2017 Cavs was one of the greatest teams LeBron James has ever played on. They had just won. They were making a strong title defense. It wasn't even regular season, but it was in the playoffs. Just offensively, they were extremely dominant. And they were the only team to win one game in the playoffs off of that Warriors team. But in any case, if Durant doesn't go to the Warriors that season, or, if he doesn't go to the Warriors for those 3 seasons, I think LeBron gets one of the 3. Because even that 2019 season where Kawhi won it in Toronto, maybe LeBron stays the next year. Maybe something different happens with Kyrie. There's a lot of what-ifs, but I think one of those seasons, especially the 2018 season where LeBron James was absolutely insane. That was probably the best individual player that I've ever watched in the playoffs. Sorry, 2013 LeBron. I think that he wins one of those. And not to mention that the 4 that LeBron won, I think I want to give him more credit than the ones that Steph won. Because those 2 that Steph won, you guys were too stacked. So even though Steph has 4 now, that's LeBron's. Not all rings, as we like to say, not all rings are created equal. We like Jordan's 6 better than Russell's 11. We like Bird's 3 better than Robert Horry's 7 too. Okay, so, and I like LeBron's 4 much better than Curry's 4, and maybe even Curry's 5. But we'll see. I gotta wait. Let's not get too ahead. But that is Steph's legacy. Greatest shooter of all time, one of the greatest teammates ever, and so he's 11th of all time in my book. Which I think, if you have him in like the 9 to 12 range, that makes sense to me. Okay. Moving on, this Warriors team has now won. They've been to 6 finals in 8 seasons, and they've won 4 of those titles. One of them, you could argue that, they shouldn't have won because Kyrie and Love were hurt. The next year, you could argue maybe they should have won because of the Draymond suspension, if you think that was BS. And then even the 2019 one, where Durant and Clay go down. I guess they both go down in the last game, but Durant had missed the first couple. But in any case, you could maybe make an argument they should have won that one. So I think 4 ends up being the right number because you can take away, you can add, but ultimately what happens, and 4 seems like it's the right number that they won. So that's them as a dynasty or whatever you want to call it, right? Some people won't classify that as a dynasty. I would say that as a dynasty. Going to 6 finals in 8 years. That's pretty legit. Because even I don't disrespect a finals loss as much as some people do. Jordan set this ridiculous standard for everyone where he never lost in the finals. But I do think it's funny because this is a little bit off topic, or not too much. But if Jordan were to run it back in the 99 season, which I think he knew, in the end of the Last Dance, he said, "Oh, we could have run it back. We could have won." He knew they weren't winning that next year. He knew they couldn't do 4 straight. He knew, especially with how old the team was, how mentally drained that team was, the salary cap issues, that team was not going to win that championship. But let's say they did. Let's say Jordan ran it back in 99. Suddenly, everyone's favorite argument for why he's the GOAT, that he's 6-0, that he's undefeated in the finals, disappears, right? Now he's 6-1. Does that make him worse? It doesn't. So anyway, that was a slight, getting sidetracked. But other dynasties, right? I think these are the list of candidates, okay? You have Bill Russell and his Celtics, who went to, and And it was actually interesting. I like the point before I explain that. I like the point that Bill Simmons was making. He was talking about dynasties too, and he said, I think it's a better way of looking at them is looking at the players rather than the teams. And so Russell, he had 11 and 13 seasons. Magic Johnson, those teams changed from, I guess from 1980, their first one, to their last one was in 88, and then even Magic goes to the finals in 1991. And that was a far different team from the first team that made the finals with him. So it's a good way to just look at it as far as players. But Magic goes to 9 finals in his 12 seasons, and they have 5. He had 5 wins, and he had 3 Finals MVPs. Jordan goes to 6 of 8, wins all 6. Duncan has 5 of 6. That was over the span of 16 years from 1999 to 2014. The 99 team to the 14 team, I believe there was only one player that was the same, and that was Tim Duncan. So that's why players make sense too. Then you have Shaq. You could look at the way that the Lakers went to 4 finals in those 5 years since they won their first one. But then even 2 seasons later, he goes to the title again with Miami, and they win. Although, a lot of people will remember that as the D Wade finals, which absolutely rightfully so. Dwayne Wade, average whatever it was, 30 points, 8 rebounds, But anyway, that's still a part of Shaq's quote-unquote dynasty if you want to go by the players. And then you have LeBron, another great reason why you should go by players, because he had won finals with 3 separate teams, only player ever to do that over the span of 10 seasons, right? 9 finals in 10 seasons. He went to 8 straight. Out of those 8, he won 3 of them. And in 2 of those, he lost to the greatest team ever, right? Especially 2017 Warriors, and then 2018 Warriors, maybe a notch below, but nearly just as good. And like I said, probably wins at least one more if the Warriors don't get Durant. And then in 2020, goes back to the finals in the bubble, which, in my opinion, that's a special ring that he won. And then the next one is Steph, it is interesting that with this Warriors dynasty, because you have Steph, Clay, and Dre, and even Andre Iguodala, who maybe we should throw Iguodala in there, because Iguodala didn't go to 6 finals in 8 years. He went to 7 finals in 8 years. The only finals since 2015, when he wins the finals MVP. Since that moment, the only finals that he did not play in was 2021, last year, Suns versus Bucks. Because in the bubble, he goes with Miami. I think at that point for him, it was 6 straight finals, and then he went to the 7th one this year with the Warriors. So, maybe it's the Iguodala dynasty. But anyway, Steph, 4 titles in 8 years. So we're just looking at ranking them. It's kind of hard to do, but I think the gold standard is going to be Jordan. It went 6 of 8 in those 2 seasons. I don't know if they play those 2 seasons. I think it looks a lot different. I don't think they win all 6. So some people would even just forget that it was in 8 seasons and just say, oh, he was 6 for 6. The Duncan one, I'm gonna say that's a little bit of a lower tier one, just because it was so stretched out. Which maybe in some ways is more impressive, but when I like to think of dynasties of I like to think of a span of time where these players, this team was just absolutely dominant. And as great as the Duncan Spurs were, they had years where they kind of flamed out, or they weren't as good as they thought, or that we thought they'd be. But absolutely still deserves to be mentioned as one of the greatest dynasties, even in sports. I think the Magic Lakers ones are pretty insane. I mean, he just gets into the league, and all of a sudden, in the finals immediately, in 1980, misses 81, goes then in 82 and 83. Oh, no, then he goes 82, 83, 84, and 85, misses in 86. So then goes to 4 straight, misses 86, and then wins back-to-back in 87 and 88, goes again in 89, loses, and then goes back again in 91 when that team was not as good. They didn't have Kareem, and I believe that was the year that Pat Riley also stepped down, so they didn't have his that all-time great coach, Pat Riley. So I think if I'm just going to go and rank them, I'm going to go Jordan's Bulls, Magic's Lakers. I need to give credit to Russell's Celtics, even though, as people like to say, he's playing against plumbers. And then I'll go LeBron. And then, so actually, those are the ones I have Curry below. If Curry can win another in the next 2 years, he's definitely in the Duncan Spurs range, or he's over the Duncan and the Spurs range. Um, Shaq, I actually don't know what to make of that one. Honestly, this is a discussion I wish there was someone else here instead of me just talking to myself, because I need someone to throw back some opinions and keep me honest. But yeah, that's where they belong, where Steph belongs, all time as far as uh, their dynasties. Okay, now let's wrap this up. I've been talking for 36 minutes. Predictions for next season. I believe that this year the NBA champion should have been the Milwaukee Bucks. And I believe that if Chris Middleton did not get hurt, we are not even talking about the Warriors dynasty. Maybe they make it to the finals. Actually, I would say they absolutely would still make it to the finals. I don't know how Chris Middleton getting hurt in the East would affect the Western Conference playoffs race. But I'd still think that the Bucks would win. And so next season, I'm anticipating a Bucks revenge tour, a Bucks comeback season. I think Giannis is the greatest player in the world. I think that with Drew Holiday and Middleton healthy, that's as talented of a big three as there is in the NBA. And I think that this offseason, while it's tough because Milwaukee is not a free agent destination and they have a lot of money already tied up in those three great players, I think that they can definitely improve. We saw in that, for me, nightmare Game 7, Bucks versus Celtics. I did not want the Celtics to win. We saw them miss just a ton of threes. Pat Connaughton, who else? Grayson Allen. It's way too many Grayson Allen minutes. And so the Bucks, I think they have an opportunity to get a lot better on the margins with those role players. So I'm predicting a Giannis MVP caliber season. I don't know if he wins the regular season MVP because for some reason we don't like to give him that award. If it's not Giannis, it'll be Luka in my opinion. So I'm saying that's a little bit soft. I'm going Giannis or Luka MVP. I believe in the conference finals, we're going to see the Nuggets beat the Dallas Mavericks. We're going to get, in the Eastern Conference Finals, the Milwaukee Bucks beating the Miami Heat. I'm contractually obligated to say that. I love the Miami Heat. I have to say that. Or maybe I shouldn't say contractually because now I'm interning for them. But in the finals, I have Bucks over Nuggets. I've for years been putting like a small wager on the Nuggets to make the finals, like at the beginning of the season. And I guess this past season, it was a little bit stupid of me because there was small chance that Jamal Murray's coming back. But if Jamal Murray's healthy, as much as I hate Jokic because of what he did to Markieff Morris, Jokic is just he's due. He's due for a signature playoff moment, I guess is what I'm saying. He already has one, right, in the bubble, coming back from down 3-1 twice. But he's due as good as he is, back-to-back MVPs. I believe it'll be time, and he's at least got to make it back to the conference finals. And I do want to also believe that the Mavericks, with the addition of Christian Wood, will also be able to do that. And whoever else they're gonna add, because I just believe in Luka that much. And no, I'm not ignoring the Warriors. So I guess I am. And I guess I kind of am. I'm going to say I am ignoring the Suns, where Chris Paul is 37 now. And I'll say the other team that I have to look out for is the Clippers. I believe they're going to come back with a vengeance, and I think they're a very similar team to this Boston team, honestly, with how they can switch everything, with having those two, great two-way scoring wings. It's going to come down to just how healthy are they, right? How good does Kawhi look when he comes back? And so the Clippers, I'm kind of sleeping on them. I would say I'm definitely sleeping on the Suns. The Warriors, I'm not sleeping on them, but I'm just not going to pick them because they just won it, and I guess that's not as exciting for me. But the team that I haven't mentioned, I think that's in the mix there, is the Lakers as well. And maybe that's just because they have LeBron, because I love him, and I hope he can get back. But yeah, they're going to have to show me something in the offseason because I still don't believe in them, even though I do like the new head coach that they hired. On the East side of things, really, you're looking at a Nets team who is kind of in limbo, so I'm not really worried about them. That Cavs team will be good and young and frisky, but they're not doing anything. Atlanta, don't care. Who else? Boston. I think they have they overperformed this year, and this is maybe the hater in me coming up, but I think they overperformed this year, and then they're gonna have a down year next year. So I really am anticipating the Bucks most of all, and then in the next other teams, it should be really the Sixers or the Heat. Sixers with Harden, that isn't promising. And so, you know what? I'm going to have faith in my squad. I think that the Heat are going to get back, and the Bucks are just going to be too good. Giannis is going to be too good. So the most confident thing that I'm saying right now is I truly believe, of course, barring injury, we saw it this year. They got injured. They didn't make it. That next year they'll be in the finals. If there's one team in the NBA that I think should be in the finals next year, it's the Bucks. They're going to have the most continuity. They're going to have the greatest player in the world. They're going to have a great, second and third guy. And then I do like the Nuggets coming out of the West. So, honestly, I feel pretty good about that pick right now. But you never know. I could say this, and it could be both. Who knows? Both teams fall apart. But, yeah. So, those are my predictions. Well, not sure how to wrap this up just by myself. The first single take episode, right? Not double take anymore. But we'll be back hopefully tomorrow or the next day or whatever with an NBA draft episode with our friend Eli Maluhi, special guest. And that'll be fun. This is definitely a very interesting draft, and I think it'll be fun to make sure we capture our thoughts before it. Because I know that years from now, we'll look back and I could see, the Chet thing really panning out, and whatever. I know John's gonna come in with hot takes about Chet, or even Paolo, or whoever else. And so I think this is a draft that's like a big, in my opinion, without even knowing much and watching much. I'm not the biggest college basketball person. I think it's gonna be a big boom or bust draft. So hopefully we get an episode out soon with that. Thank you for listening to me babble for 43 minutes now. Have a good one. Peace out, and as always, go Heat.